Okay, we're going to table 4, and I think it'll be our last question.
There's actually 2 people.
Oops, behind you. Thanks.
There's actually 2 people had questions at the table. That's
Great.
Okay. Try and keep it short. Art Hansen from the International Institute for Sustainable Development. The question I have really follows on what David Suzuki was saying, and that is ecological services really isn't mentioned in your discussion. And it strikes me that this is really one of the critical things that we have to come to grips with, and particularly in the way that PNCIMA has been drawn, where we're looking at both the watersheds and the ocean, and therefore the links between the two. And I just wonder why ecological services is not highlighted as a challenge, because I think it's a very important part of our overall discussion.
Ecological services.
Well, just the short answer to that is, the approach that was taken in the paper was to come up with some topics that people could readily identify with. So people, I think, are more inclined to relate to, oh yes, commercial fishing or First Nations cultural aspects than they are, that particular concept of ecological services. But I'd like to think that, if you piece some of these items together, you would get a bit of a sense of that.
And there was a second question we just have time for.
Yes. Howard Breen from Friends of the Earth Canada. Hi, John.
Hi,
John, you're known for your prescience in respect to PNCIMA work, but one thing perhaps that many of us, including yourself, didn't see coming was the dramatic decline in the financial markets globally. And now, for the first time in living memory, we're actually debating the model that we globally trade and do finance with. And I guess my question would be is, given this dramatic change in affairs, whether or not we would also be looking at, in respect to PNCIMA, is looking at new growth models, or even fundamentally challenging growth, and looking more at a steady state economy as a way to address sustainability and development.
Again, that's a great question, Howard. I just don't feel comfortable answering that. The terms of reference for the work that I did wasn't to cover that, but I'm sure that kind of point will come up later on in the sessions.
Let me also say, as an outsider, because I don't work for government either, and I wouldn't have been invited here as one of the 300 of you. I'm just a facilitator that gets brought in and gets paid by government, although I always pay government more than they pay me. What's become apparent to the several of us who are helping facilitate this is that PNCIMA is an enormous enterprise that is at the moment very coarse-grained, if I can use that term, as a planning exercise, and it's going to become much more refined. And probably some of those measures, some of those decisions about which theories to follow, some of the priorities of which things to honor at the expense of others, if that's ever going to happen, what partnerships are going to be for, all of that stuff is for the future. So although your questions in this session and in the previous session are far more detailed, we're still at a very coarse grain. And that's why some of the things I think that David said and others have said are important. How do we get it right at the coarse grain so that you can move on over the next months and years to do very much more refined and specific stuff? Fascinating. And we have no more time for questions for John.